Commander Vexel stood on the bridge of his flagship and looked at the small blue planet on the viewing screen. It was a pretty world, he thought. Blue oceans, Greenland's white clouds floating in the sky. It looked peaceful. It looked weak. He had been a commander in the Valdran Dominion for over 200 years. In that time he had conquered 17 different species across the galaxy. Some had advanced technology, some had powerful armies, some had tried to hide in the deep places of their worlds. It did not matter. The Valdran always won. They were born for conquest. The Valden were tall creatures standing 9 ft high. Their bodies were covered in air plates that acted like natural armor. They had 4 arms, each one strong enough to bend metal. Their eyes could see in the dark, and their hearing was sharp enough to detect a heartbeat from across a room. Evolution had made them perfect warriors. Vexel remembered his first conquest. He was young then, barely 50 years old. The species was called the Norati. They had built great cities and believed themselves to be the most intelligent beings in their part of space. It took Texra 3 days to break them. By the end of the first week, the Norati had surrendered it completely. Now they served the Dominion as workers and servants. Every conquest after that was the same. Some species fought harder than others, some lasted longer, but in the end they all fell, they all broke. They all learned to bow before the Valden. Now the High Council had given Text a new mission. There was a planet at the edge of explored space. It was home to a species called humans. The Valdrans could have studied them for several months and sent back their reports. Textral read those reports many times. The humans were small creatures, standing about 6 ft tall at most. Their skin was soft and could be cut easily. They had no natural armor, no clothes, no fangs. They needed to eat several times each day and required many hours of sleep each night. Their bodies broke easily and their lifespans were laughably short. Most humans lived less than 100 years. The Scoots also reported that the humans spent much of their history fighting each other. They had wars over land, over resources, over ideas, over things that seemed meaningless. They killed their own kind in huge numbers. This confused the Valdran. Why would a species waste energy fighting itself when there was a whole galaxy to conquer? The conclusion was simple. Humans were primitive, violent, and self-destructive. They were not a threat. They would make adequate servants once they were properly broken. Dex smiled at the thought. He commanded a fleet of 3,000 warships. Each ship carried hundreds of Valdran warriors, trained from birth for Ka. His fleet had enough firepower to crack a planet. Alpha against the humans and their primitive chemical rockets and sample projectile weapons. It would not even be a fair fight. He called his officers to the bridge for a final meeting before the invasion began. We will claim this world before their sun sets twice. Sexral announced. The humans are weak. They have no real military strength compared to ours. We will land our forces near one of their population centers, destroy any resistance, and broadcast the result to the rest of the planet. When the humans see what happens to those who fight us, they will surrender. His officers nodded in agreement. They had seen this strategy work many times before. Terror was an effective tool. Once Asps understood that resistance meant death, they usually chose to live on their knees rather than die on their feet. Vexral ordered the communication officer to send the standard ultimatum to Earth. It was a simple message translated into all major human languages. It said that the Valden Dominion claimed this planet and all its resources. The humans had one day to surrender. If they did not surrender, the Valdren would take the planet by force and show no mercy. The fleet waited for a response. Textual expected panic. He expected emergency broadcast and desperate peace for negotiation. He expected the humans to argue among themselves about what to do. Instead, the response came in less than an hour. It was a single transmission sent from multiple locations on the planet at the same time, as if the humans had agreed on it instantly. The message contained only 4 words: come and take. A text starred at the screen. His translation officer checked the message 3 times to make sure it was correct. It was. The humans were not asking for time to consider. They were not begging for mercy. They were not even asking questions about the Vald or their capabilities. They were issuing a challenge. Dexter laughed. He could not help it. The sound echoed across the bridge, and his officers joined in. A species that could barely leave their own planet was challenging the Valdren Dominion. It was the funniest of things that Exral had endured in decades. Brave words from a weak species. Exral said they do not understand what they face, but they will learn. He shows a target for the first strike. His scouts had identified a coastal settlement called San Diego. It was a large city with several million humans living in it. There were military bases nearby. It would be a perfect place to demonstrate Valdren power. Dexter lured Fossens of his best warriors to prepare for ground assault. They would land at dawn when the light would make it easy to see, and the humans would still be waking from their sleep. The warriors would secure the beach, move into the city, and crush any resistance. The whole operation would take a few hours at most. The landing ships launched from the fleet and descended toward Earth. Texral watched them go, feeling satisfied. Soon this little blue planet would belong to the Dominion, and its people would serve Valden masters. He thought about the human message. Come and take it. Such confidence from such a weak species. It was almost admirable. Almost. They would learn their mistake soon enough. Dex turned away from the viewing screen and went to his quarters to rest. There was no need for him to watch the landing. It would be a simple operation over before he finished it. Next meal, he could not have known that he had just made the greatest mistake of his very long life. He could not have known that in a few short hours, everything he believed about conquest and war and power would be destroyed. He could not have known that the small, soft, fragile humans were about to teach the Vald a lesson they would never forget, but he would learn. They all would. The Valren landing ships touched down on the beach just as the sun rose over the ocean. Then Fuzzened warriors stepped onto the sand, their weapons ready, their armor shining in the morning light. They formed perfect lines. Just as they had been trained, they expected to see humans running in terror. They expected to hear screaming and panic. Instead, they saw a single human woman standing alone on the beach. She was small like all humans. She wore sample green clothes that the Valdren recognized as military uniform. Her brown hair was tied back from her face. She held a small device in one hand, some kind of communication tool. She did not look afraid. She did not even look worried. The ground commander, a veteran warrior named Cattle, stepped Forward, he towered over the human. Woman more than 3 feet taller than her. His forearms could have torn her apart. In seconds, "You are the welcoming party?" Cattle asked, his voice filled with amusement. His translator device converted his words to the human language. The woman looked up at him with calm eyes. "My name is Kate Murphy. I am here to give you one chance to leave." Cattle made the Valdrin sound for Lot. The warriors behind him joined in. This tiny creature was telling them to leave. It was like a small insect threatening a giant. "You have 5 minutes," Kate Murphy said. Her voice was steady and quiet. "After that, I cannot help you." Cattle leaned closer to her. "And what happens after 5 minutes?" "Little human," Kate Murphy checked the device in her hand. 4 minutes now." Cattle stopped laughing. There was something in her voice that he did not like. She spoke like someone who knew something he did not, but that was impossible. What could one small human know that would threaten Tenfas on Valrin warrior? He reported the situation to Commander Texrel in orbit. "Kill her and proceed with the operation." Fextra ordered. "This is a delay tactic. The humans are probably trying to evacuate their civilians." Cattle raised his weapon and pointed it at Kate Murphy. "Your time is up, human." 3 minutes, she said, not moving at all. "Are you deaf?" I said. "Your time is up." "I heard you, but my timer says 3 minutes. I suggest you use them wisely." Cattle had killed hundreds of enemies in his career. Many of them had begged for their lives. Many had tried to run. Some had frozen in fear, unable to move. But he had never seen anything like this. This human woman was about to die, and she acted like she was the one in control. It made him angry. He asked to his warriors to prepare to fire. Then the world exploded. The sound came first, a sharp crack like thunder, a bit faster. Then the Valrin in the front line started falling. They did not even have time to scream. One moment they were standing. The next moment they were dead on the sand. Cole spun around trying to see where the attack was coming from. More cracks sounded from every direction. More warriors fell. The Valdrin shields, designed to stop energy weapons and plasma bolts, did nothing. The projectiles went through them like they were not even there. From the hills above the beach, from buildings in the distance, from holes dug into the sand that no one had noticed, human soldiers were firing. They were using simple weapons that shot small pieces of metal at very high speeds. The Valdrin had seen these weapons in the scout reports and dismissed them as primitive. They were not dismissing them now. A young human named Danny Ortiz leaned on a hilltop more than a mile away. He was 22 years old. He had been shooting since he was 8. His refer was all the technology by Valdrin standard, just metal and gunpowder and simple optics, but in his ends it was death itself. He aimed, breathed slowly, and pulled the trigger. Valdic fell. He moved to the next target. Another shot, another kill. He did this 14 times in 30 seconds. 14. Valdrin dead before they knew what hit them. Across the beach, similar scene played out. Human snipers, Eden and Patience, picked off Valdin warriors with terrifying accuracy. The aliens had better armor, better technology, more soldiers, but the humans had something else. They had been fighting wars on this planet for thousands of years. They had turned killing into an art form. Kate Murphy still stood in the same spot. Bullets flew past her, but none of the human snipers would hit their own Commander, she looked at Cattle, who was crouching behind the landing ship, trying to understand what was happening. Time's up, she said. Then the aircraft came. They screamed over the horizon, flying faster than anything the Valdrin had expected, human jets piloted by men and women who seemed to have no fear of death. Zoo straight into the VR form, releasing bombs that turned the landing zone into fire. And Cal Flight Du was 28 years old. He had wanted to be a pilot since he was a child. Today his dream had turned into a nightmare and a glory. All at once, his jet was hit by Valdrin fire within the first minute. Warning! Lights filled his cockpit. ISIN were failing. A normal person might have tried to escape. Chris Dawson was not a normal person. He aimed his damage at a Valdrin troop carrier, a massive ship that still held 300 warriors. He pushed the throttle forward, accelerating toward it. At the last moment, he pulled the ejection handle and shot out of the cockpit. His jet slammed into the troop carrier and both exploded in a ball of fire. Chris Dawson landed hard on the beach, his parachute barely slowing his fall. He broke 2 ribs and twisted his ankle. He was surrounded by Valdrin warriors who had survived the explosion. He pulled out his sidearm, a sampler pistol, and started shooting. When the rescue team found him 20 minutes later, he was sitting on top of a dead Valdrin, reloading his weapon. 7 more alien bodies lay around him. Took you long enough, he said. By sunset, the first wave of Valdrin was gone. Alan Fusant, warrior, dead or dying on the beach. Landing ships were burning wreckage. The sand was stained with alien blood. Commander Texrel watched from orbit. Unable to speak, his officer stood in shocked silence around him. This was impossible. This could not be happening. The Valdrin had never lost a first engagement. They had never lost 10,000 warriors in a single day, but the evidence was on the viewing screen. Impossible to deny. Kate Murphy appeared on the communication channel. Her face was dirty and there was a cut on her forehead, but she was smiling. Command Zal, she said, I hope you were paying attention. That was your first lesson. There will be more. She ended the transmission. Dex stood alone on his bridge looking at the blue planet that had just killed 10,000 of his warrior. Something cold moved through his body. It was not fear, he told himself. Valdrin did not feel fear, but deep inside, in a place he did not want to examine. He was not so sure anymore. Valdrin had a rule for dealing with species that resisted. If an enemy refused to surrender, you destroyed their cities, you burned their homes, you killed their families. Broken arts created broken spirits. It was simple, and it had always worked. Commander Texra gave the order 3 days after the disaster on the beach. His fleet moved into position above the major human cities: New York, London, Tokyo, Beijing, Paris, Moscow, the biggest population centers on the planet. Perhaps they were brave because they had not suffered enough. Dexrel said to his officers, we will teach them what suffering truly means. The bombardment began at midnight. Energy weapons rained down from the sky, turning buildings into dust and streets into rivers of fire. Millions of humans died in the first hour, million more in the hours that followed. The great cities of Earth burned like candles in the dark. Text watched the destruction with satisfaction. This was more like it. This was how the Valdrin made war. This was how the Valdrin made war. He waited for the surrender to come. He waited for the broken voices and the desperate pleas for mercy. He waited. For 3 days, the surrender never came. Instead, something happened that Texrel could not understand. The human resistance became stronger. Their attacks became more aggressive. Where the Valdrin expected despair, they found Raj. Where they expected submission, they found defiance. A human general named Rikaway Santa broadcast that every Valdrin ship received. He was an older man with gray hair and a face full of scars from old battles. He stood in front of a burning city, and his voice was steady as stone. You think you can break us by killing our people? Always said, we have spent our entire existence killing each other. We have buried our children to wars, to plagues, to famines. Every generation we face something that should destroy us, and every generation we survive, we get back up. We keep fighting. You are not special. You are not the worst thing we have faced. You are just next. Dexel ordered the broadcast to be analyzed. His advisor studied human history, trying to understand what allow meant. What they found disturbed them. The humans had fought 2 massive wars in a single century that killed nearly 100 million of their own kind. They had survived disease that wiped out half their population. They had recovered from natural disasters that destroyed entire regions. Each time they rebuilt, each time they came back stronger. Other species in the galaxy avoided conflict because they feared loss. Humans had lost so much throughout their history that they had learned to live with it. Loss did not stop them. Loss made them angry. A young pilot named Megan Torres showed the Valdrin exactly what this meant. She was 24 years old, born in a small town in Texas. Her father had been a soldier. Her grandfather had been a soldier. Fighting was in her blood. When the war began, Megan flew home without rest. 37 missions in 4 days. She slept in her cockpit between flights, eating cold food and drinking water from a bottle. Air commanders or dare to rest. She refused rest when they are dead, she said. On Air 38's mission, airplane was shot down over enemy-held territory. She ejected and landed in a forest where Valdrin patrol were searching for survivors. A normal person would have hidden and waited for rescue. Megan Torres was not a normal person. She found the Valdrin before they found her. Using only a combat knife, she killed 9 alien warriors. 9 creatures twice her size, covered in natural armor, armed with advanced weapons. She killed them one by one, silent and deadly, moving through the forest like a ghost. She found a Valdrin communication device and used it to send critical information back to human command, troop position, patrol route, supply lines, and form that would save thousands of human lives. The Valdrin finally captured her. 6 hours later, she had a broken arm and 3 broken ribs. She was covered in alien blood. When they surrounded her, she smiled. What took you so long? She asked. The rescue team arrived before the Valdrin could interrogate her. It was led by a surgeon named Ben Castillo, a quiet man from California who had never imagined he would be fighting aliens, but here he was leading his team into enemy territory to save 1 pilot. During the extraction, the Valdrin ambushes them. A plasma bolt hit Ben directly in the chest. He fell, his heart stopped by the energy blast. His team thought he was dead. They continued fighting, carrying his body with them, refusing to leave him. Behind, the medic worked on Ben while the others provided cover fire. She used the defibrillator to shock his heart. Once, twice, 3 times. On the 4th try, his heart started beating again. Ben Castillo woke up in a medical facility 12 hours later. The doctor told him he had died for 2 full minutes. His heart had stopped. He had been clinically dead. When can I go back? Ben asked. The doctor stared him. You died yesterday, but I am alive now. When can I go back? He returned to active duty the next morning. Dexel received reports about these incidents. He received reports about hundreds of similar incidents. Humans who should have died but kept fighting. Humans who suffered terrible wounds but refused to stop. Human watched their friends die and responded not with grief but with fury. What are these creatures? Texrel asked his tactical advisor, veteran who had served in 60 Conquest. The advisor had no answer. In 60 Conquest, he had never seen anything like this. The Valdrin had conquered species through fear. They broke their enemies by making them afraid of death, afraid of pain, afraid of loss. But humans had a different relationship with these things. They had lived with fear for so long that it had become a companion instead of a master. They did not run from death, they walked toward it. The Exral tried new tactics. He targeted food supplies, thinking hunger would weaken them. The humans learned to grow food in hidden place and shared what little they had. He targeted water source. The humans dug new wells and collected rain. He targeted their communication systems. The humans used old methods, runners and signals and codes that the Valdrin could not break. Every attack made them more determined. Every loss made them fight harder. 6 months into the war, Dexra held a meeting with his senior officers. The mood was dark. They had lost hundreds of ships and tens of thousands of warriors. The humans were still fighting. They showed no signs of stopping. We have never faced an enemy like this, one officer said. They do not behave like other species. They do not break. Vexra looked at the viewing screen at the small blue planet that was costing him so much. He thought about General Alo's words. We are not the worst thing they have faced. You are just next. For the first time in his long life, Fextrel wondered if he had finally met an enemy that could not be beaten, not because they were stronger, not because they had better weapons, but because they simply refused to accept defeat. It was a terrifying thought. He pushed it away and ordered another attack. A small voice whispered that this war might end differently than all the others. He did not want to listen to that voice, but it grew louder every day. 2 years into the war, Commander Texra had lost half his fleet. His warriors were tired. His officers were worried. DZ Conquest he had promised the High Council had turned into a nightmare that seemed to have no end. He spent his nights studying the humans, trying to understand them. He read their history, their literature, their philosophy. He watched recordings of their wars, their disasters, their moments of triumph and tragedy. He learned things that kept him awake long after he should have been sleeping. He learned that humans had invented weapons capable of destroying their entire planet. They called them nuclear weapons. They had enough of these weapons to kill every living thing on Earth many times over, yet they had never used them against each other in full war. They had chosen not to, even when they hated each other, even when they fought bitter wars over land and power and ideas, but they had kept the weapons ready. They had waited, preparing for a day when they might truly need them. That day had come. In the first year of the war, humans launched nuclear strikes against Valran ground force. Explosions were terrible to witness. Anti-army disappeared in flashes of light and heat. The Valdran had never faced such weapons. They had no defense against them, but what disturbed Texel most was not the weapons themselves. It was what they revealed about humanity. These creatures had been planning for extinction-level threats for generations. They had built weapons of ultimate destruction and then exercise restaurant, keeping them ready, but waiting for an enemy worthy of their full power. The Valdan had been that enemy. Text also learns about a human concept that had no equivalent in Valdran language. They called it sacrifice. It meant giving up something precious, often your own life, to protect others. The Valdran understood dying in battle. They understood killing for victory, but dying so that others might leave with no personal gain, no glory, no reward. This was strange to them. Then Texel witnessed the sacrifice firsthand, and he began to understand why humans were so dangerous. It happened in the third of the war. A Valdran strike force of 20 ships was heading toward a convoy of human refugees. 42 civilians, including many children, were trying to escape to a safe zone in the southern part of the planet. The strike force would reach them in Caesars. The only human ship close enough to help was called the Defiance. It was an old vessel built before the war, originally designed for exploration. It had been converted for combat, but it was still outgunned by every Valdran warship in the strike force. The defense was commanded by Captain Kyle Brennan. He was 42 years old. He had a wife named Maria and a daughter named Sophie. Before the war, he had been a teacher. He taught history to young people, telling them stories about human courage and human failure, and everything in between. Now he was a soldier, and he had a choice to make. He could run. His ship was fast enough to escape. He could save his crew and leave to fight another day. It was the logical choice, the smart choice. Or he could fight. He could take his single ship against 20 enemies and try to give the refugee convoy time to escape. He would almost certainly die. His crew would almost certainly die with him. Kyle Brennan made his choice in less than a second. All horns to battle stations, he announced over the ship's communication system. We are going to hold the line. The convoy needs 3 hours to reach safety. We will give them 3 hours. His first officer, a young woman named Amy Porter, looked at him. She understood what he was asking. She understood that he was asking them all to die. Yes, Captain, she said, and went to her station. Defiance moved to intercept the Valdran strike force. Kyle Brennan saw a final message to his wife and daughter, recorded it quickly while his crew prepared for battle. Maria, I love you. I have always loved you. Tell Sophie that her father didn't run. Tell her to be brave, to be kind, to never give up. Tell her that I am proud of her and I always will be wherever I am. Then he put the recording away and focused on the battle ahead. The fight lasted 3 hours and 12 minutes. The Defiance fought like nothing the Vald had ever seen. When their shields failed, they kept fighting. When their main weapons went offline, they used secondary weapons. When those failed too, they used a missile designed for small threats, firing them in massive swarms. At one point, a fire broke out in the lower decks. Kyle Brennan ordered the affected section sealed off. The air was vaulted into space, killing the fire but also making those areas uninhabitable. He then sent crew members in spacesuit to make repair on the outside of the ship, while Valdrin weapons exploded around them. They kept fighting. 2 hours into the battle, the Defiance had destroyed 5 Valdrin ships, but the damage was mounting. The ship was falling apart. The engines were failing. Half the crew was dead or wounded. Kyle Brennan looked at the tactical display. The refugee convoy was almost safe. They needed 15 more minutes. The main engines died. The Defiance was drifting, powerless, surrounded by Valdrin ships. Preparing to finish it off, Kyle Brennan stood up from his chair. All hands abandon ship, he ordered. Use the escape pods. Get as far away as you can. His crew hesitated. They did not want to leave him. That is an order, he said quietly. Go. They went. Amy Porter was the last to leave. She stopped at the door and looked back at her captain. What are you going to do? She asked. My job, he said. She left. The escape pods launched. Kyle Brennan was alone on his dying ship. He walked to the engineering section where the main reactor was located. The reactor was damaged, unstable, filled with enough energy to create an explosion that would destroy anything nearby. He began working on the controls, overriding the safety systems, pushing the reactor toward overload. A Valdrin destroyer moved to finish the defense. It was the largest ship in the strike force, carrying 500 warriors. Kyle Brennan made his drifting ship at the destroyer. He used the last of the maneuvering thrusters to adjust his course. He watched the Valdrin ship grow larger and larger on his screen. Tell Sophie I didn't run, he said to no one. Reactor explode. The Defiance and Kyle Brennan with it slammed into the Valdrin destroyer in a ball of fire that could be seen from orbit. Both ships were completely destroyed. The remaining Valdrin ships hesitated. Their commander was dead, their largest vessel was gone, and the refugee convoy had reached to safety. 40 humans lived. Because one man chose to die, Dex received the report of the battle in silence. He watched the recordings of the Defiance fighting against impossible odds. He watched Kyle Brennan's final moment alone on his ship, choosing death so that others might leave. He did not understand it. The Valdrin valued survival above all things. They fought to win, to conquer, to expand, dying for others, especially strangers, made no sense to them. But watching that recording, FX felt something he had never felt before. It was not admiration exactly. It was not respect, though that was part of it. It was fear, not fear of human weapons or human technology. Fear of human will. Fear of a species that produced individuals like Kyle Brennan, ordinary people who would throw away their own existence to protect others. How did you defeat an enemy like that? How did you break people who considered their own lives less important than their cause? Texel did not know, and that uncertainty, that confusion was the most frightening thing he had ever experienced. He thought about Kyle Brennan's daughter Sophie receiving her father's final massage. He wondered what kind of person she would become, raised with that example, that legacy. He wondered if he would one day have to face her. The sword kept him awake for many nights. The war lasted 7 years. In those 7 years, the Valdrin lost more ships and warriors than they had lost in the previous 500 years of conquest combined. Their empire, once the most feared power in the galaxy, was weakened and exhausted. The High Council that had ordered the invasion of Earth was replaced twice. Texrel himself faced calls for his removal, his execution, his disgrace. But he remained in command because no one else wanted the job, no one else wanted to face the humans, and now, finally, it was ending. Not with a great battle, not with a final explosion of violence, it was ending with a conversation. Dex's flagship was the last survivor of his original fleet. He brought it to a neutral location, a space station far from Earth, where the humans had agreed to meet. He expected to face ardent warriors, generals covered in medals. Instead, he found a small woman waiting for him in the meeting room. Her name was Dr. Lisa Morno. She was 53 years old. Before the war, she had been a professor of history and a diplomat. She had helped negotiate peace treaties between nations that had hated each other for centuries. She was known for her calm voice and her ability to find common ground. She was also a widow. Her husband Apillo had died the first months of the war. Her son, a young soldier, had died in the third year. She had buried Zambus in a cemetery that was later destroyed by Valdrin Bomba. She did not even have grave to visit, but when she looked at Texrel, her eyes were not filled with hate, they were filled with something harder to understand, something that made Texrel uncomfortable. They sat across from each other at a sample table. No weapons, no guards, no threats, just two beings who represented their peoples. You have fought well, Fakes said. It was the traditional Valden opening for surrender negotiations. Your species has earned the respect of the Dominion. We will withdraw from your territory and leave your world in peace. He expected gratitude. He expected relief. He expected the human to accept this offer and thank him for his mercy. Dr. Morno shook her head slowly. That is not how this ends, she said. Text. Defend. His armor plates tightened against his body. You refuse our offer of peace. I refuse your offer of withdrawal. She corrected him. Peace is a different matter. I do not understand. Dr. Morno leaned forward. Commander, you came to our home. You killed our children. You burned our cities. You murdered millions of innocent people who had never done anything to you. And now you want to simply leave. You want to return to your empire and tell them that it was not worth the trouble, that the humans were too difficult. What more can we give? Text asked. We are offering to leave. We are offering to never return. Surely that is enough. No, Dr. Morno said. It is not enough. For a long moment there was silence. Textile tried to read the human's face, but he could not understand her expression. It was calm, almost gentle, but there was still underneath. What do you want? He finally asked. Dr. Morno reached into her pocket and pulled out a small data sheet. Those are the coordinates of your home world, she said. Your capital planet, where your government sees, where your families live. We have had those coordinates for 3 years. We could have some weapons there at any time. We could have ended your species the way you tried to endorse. Dex trembled as he picked up the chip. He stared at it, trying to process what she was saying. You knew where our home was, he said. All this time, all this time, she confirmed. Why did you not attack? Dr. Morno looked at him with those strange calm eyes, because we are not you, the world extra like a physical blow. He had spent 7 years studying humans, trying to understand them, trying to find their weakness. He had learned about their history, their wars, their capacity for violence. He had seen them kill and destroy with terrible efficiency, but he had missed something fundamental. He had missed the other half of who they were. We could destroy you, Dr. Morneau continued. We have the capability. We have the weapons. After what you did to us, many of our people wanted exactly that. They wanted revenge. They wanted to make you suffer the way we suffered. But you did not know, because then we would become you. We would become conquerors, destroyer, killers of innocence. We would lose the very thing that makes us who we are. She leaned back in her chair and Tex saw how tired she looked. This woman had lost everything in the war, her husband, her son, her home. She had every reason to hate him, to want his death and the death of his ant species. Instead, she was offering him something else. What do you want from us? He asked again. I want you to go home, Dr. Morneau said. I want you to tell your people what happened here. Tell them about the humans. Tell them about what you saw, what you learned, what you experienced. Tell them that we are not pre. Tell them that we do not start wars, but we finish them. Tell them that anyone who comes to our world with evil in their hearts will find us waiting, and if they do not believe me, then they can come and find out for themselves. She smiled, but there was no warmth in it. We will be ready. We are always ready. Texra looked at the data chip in his hands, the coordinates of his home world, the power to destroy his people. The humans had held this power for years and never used it. Not because they were weak, because they were strong enough to choose not to. There is one more thing, Dr. Morneau said. Yes, I want you to remember my husband's name. It was Carlos Morneau. He was a pilot. He loved music and cooking and terrible old movies. He was a good man. I will remember, thanks said. And my son, his name was Daniel. He wanted to be a doctor. He wanted to help people. He was 19 years old when your soldiers killed him. I will remember. Good. Dr. Morneau stood up. Then we are finished here. Go home, Commander. Live the rest of your life with those memories and make sure your people understand that humanity does not seek war, but if war finds us, we will end it. Every single time she turned and walked out of the room, Texrel sat alone, holding the data ship, thinking about everything he had seen and done and learned in 7 years of war. He returns to his home world. He told his people what had happened. Some believed him, some did not, but war was over, and the Valden would need centuries to recover from what the humans had done to them. In his private quarters, Vex Ral kept a journal. He wrote about his experiences, easy thoughts, easy fears. The final entry, written on the night before he died of old age many years later, was found by historians who studied the war. It said, I have seen empires rise and fall. I have witnessed stars die and worlds burn, but nothing in my existence prepared me for humanity. They are fragile, short-lived, and small. They should not have survived. Yea, they did not merely survive. They made us afraid, not of their weapons or their ships, but of something far more terrifying, their absolute refusal to surrender, their willingness to die for each other, their ability to be both gentle and ruthless, merciful and deadly, peaceful and Warrior, I felt fear for the first time. When I went to war with humanity. It is a feeling I will carry until my final breath, and I am grateful that I never have to face them again. Galaxy remembered for 1,000 years. After the war, no species dared to threaten Earth. Sophie Brennan, daughter of Captain Kyle Brennan, grew up to be an admiral. She commanded the defense fleet that protected Earth for 40 years. She never had to fight another war. The memory of her father and all the others who sacrificed themselves kept the peace. Humanity had earned that peace the only way they knew how, through fire, through blood, through loss, and through the unbreakable will to endure. They would always endure, and the stars would remember.